Glory to Jesus Christ, glory forever. I'm Dennis G. Welcome back to Cherubim Creations. I'm going to start doing, God willing, reflections on the Byzantine Bible readings for the day, and this is for the Sunday of October 19th, which is the 19th Sunday after Pentecost. And again, if you go to the short page, you'll see the Bible series I have there, and you can go to the scripture. I'm not going to reread them now. Please go there and read it yourself, but I will just give my reflections on 2 Corinthians chapter 11, 31 through 12, verse 9, where St. Paul is speaking about a man that he knew above 14 years ago that went up to the third heaven, right? And he heard things and seen visions, things that uh, is not granted to man to utter. Now, the reflection I shall give here is that he went up to the third heaven, right? There's multiple heavens, and we see even with St. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, where there's the atmospheric heaven, right? And then there is, you can say, um, maybe the universe, or that could be included in the atmospheric heaven. Um, but then there's ultimately what I want to get at is the place that God dwells, which is the third heaven. Now, we do believe that there are different levels of heaven as such where God dwells. But to my understanding, he's speaking about the third heaven, which is where God dwells. Now, amongst the level there, not certain, would have to go to the church fathers, which I would like to get a series going on that as well, commentaries on the scriptures from the church fathers, as I've been doing the series on the Antichrist from the church fathers, a mini series on the shorts as well. But this is very important because ultimately it reveals the reality of heaven, of course, and also the fact that um, someone went there and came back, whether in the body or out of the body, he does not know. Now, I've always thought it was St. John whom he was speaking of, but many, many commentaries would say that it's actually St. Paul himself. He's speaking in a way which is humble, in a humble manner. He's saying that I know a man, but he doesn't want to say himself. And it's amazing to see that, right? He was in verse 4, he was caught up into paradise and heard secret words which it is not granted to man to utter. But he does not want to glory in himself. He says that I will glory nothing but in my infirmities, right? Not for himself. So this is again something to meditate on, that until we die in God's friendship, we're not saved. Even St. Paul being taken up to the third heaven, right? Does that mean he's saved? And does that mean that's his glory? No, it's a glory of God. Right? We know he's saved now. The church is deemed such. But he was not trying to focus on himself, but focus on this revelation, right? And communicate that to us. Now he says he was also given a sting of my flesh. He said, it was given me a sting of my flesh. And I'm reading from the DRA edition, 1899 edition. There was given me a sting of my flesh, an angel of Satan to buffet me, in verse 7. So again, he says, lest the greatness of the revelation should exalt me, right? In other words, fill him up with pride. Anyone who has been given a revelation from God should not be puffed up with pride, but again, should deem himself still as the lowest of all for the sake of being the servant of all, whom Christ came to serve and is the greatest of all. So he says that an angel of Satan, right? to buffet me. So another translation is a thorn in the flesh. So I think that St. Paul is a good example to us. Many of us suffer with different issues. I mean, there are a plethora of problems that we have, whether natural, mental, in the sense of physical, mental, or even spiritual, that we struggle with. It can be scrupulosity. It can be, you know, uh, you have a broken leg. You have an infirmity in your body that's causing pain. You have mental sufferings, right? You have sufferings from others, social sufferings, psychological sufferings, relationships, etc. There's usually something that God allows us to have so we can be humble. Okay. And I can speak much more on that, but just meditate on that reality that he says 3 times, right? He says, for which thing thrice I besought the Lord that it might depart from me. But in verse 9, the Lord said to him, paraphrasing, and he said to me, the Lord said to him, my grace is sufficient for thee, for God is made perfect in infirmity. Gladly, therefore, I will glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may dwell in me. So there you go. That's the first reading, the end of the first reading. We see that Christ is permitting this, right, for his greater good, for St. Paul's greater good. Okay. Again, how often do we should meditate on this? How often do you meditate on this? How often do I meditate on this? We should give thanks in all circumstances, Christ said, and just the St. Paul said in just the this past week readings, the Byzantine Lectionary that I have again. So again, we ask for God's mercy, and we continue on in this state of being in our earthly bodies. There must be some form of suffering, and we'll see. I believe tomorrow, the readings he talks about working out our salvation in fear and trembling in Philippians 2 verse 12. He says we must work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And of course, that's not a working out of the sense of we're working our salvation initially. That's only through God's grace, through baptism, right? But that once we are baptized, once we are in God's covenant, then we can work out our salvation in the sense that we suffer with Christ. Colossians 1 verse 24, we suffer with Christ, and we unite our sufferings to him on the cross, right? As I'm looking at the crucifix. And that's what brings fruit to our sufferings. All right, moving on to the gospel of Luke chapter 6, 31 to 36. Again, it's on my short Byzantine Lectionary, Byzantine Bible Readings. So you can go ahead and read over that. But here Christ is continuing on from yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, where he's giving the Beatitudes. You can also find that in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 3, I believe, which is more extensive than Luke's in chapter 6. But we see that he's continuing on from there, that we should be loving one another. And what does that really mean? Well, he says, if you truly love, right? If he says, and if you love them that love you, what thanks are to you? So what benefit or merit is it to you? Right? For sinners also love those that love them. Okay. But we should, what? He says, do good to them who do good to you. For sinners also do this, right? No, he actually says, if you do good to them who do good to you, what thanks are to you? For sinners also do this. So he's saying, do good to those who do bad to you. Right? Of course, you should do good to those who do good to you as well. He is saying that. But he's saying there's no benefit to you. So he says, do good to those who do good to you. But likewise do good to those who do bad to you. And that would be in verse 35, right? Where he says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So the golden rule is in verse 31, Luke chapter 6, verse 31 through 36. And as you would that men should do to you, do you also to them in like manner. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, in other words. So that's a golden rule. How often do we follow the golden rule? Or do we retaliate eye for an eye? Like the Hammurabi Code, I believe it was, from 10,000 years ago, which was a progression, right? From, hey, before that, you pluck my eye out, I'm going to go kill your whole family. Now it's like, you pluck my eye out, okay, I'm going to pluck your eye out. But as Gandhi says, quoting from a pagan, God have mercy on his soul, he still had wisdom to share. He says, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Well, Jesus, he's probably picking up on that from Jesus as he knew about Christianity. As Jesus here says again, what good is it if you do good to those who do good to you? You have no merit in heaven for that. You get an earthly reward, maybe, right? But ultimately, your reward shall be great, he says, if you love your enemies. Do good and lend, hoping for nothing thereby, in verse 35, and your reward shall be great, and you shall be the sons of the highest. Okay. For he says that God is actually kind, right, to the unthankful and to the evil. So we should be like God, above and beyond, right? Turn the other cheek. So he says, be therefore merciful as your Father also is merciful, in verse 36. Those who shall give mercy, mercy shall be shown to them. So there is, for those that know about karma, right, going back to Gandhi there, connecting to Hinduism, it's not karma, in its full extent, but there is an element there of truth, right? As Vatican II states, there's an element of truth in all religions. A different ray in the prism, right? God's light, the white light that hits the prism. There's different truths in all religion, but Catholicism contains that fullness of truth, all the rays of light. And so in this situation, it's going to be those who are giving mercy to others, God will give mercy in return. So, and he also says in another verse that that measure, I should say, the measure you measure out to others will in turn be measured out to you, right? And he kind of explains that. He kind of gives an example of that. Well, I should say that he's referring to a situation. He's referring to an imagery where he said, shaken up, poured into your lap. God, basically God's blessings will be overflowing towards you. So please excuse me. I'm just going off the cuff here from my memory. Again, for those that don't know, again, I studied the master's level, graduated. I also taught at the university level. So just trying to give any bit of knowledge to share that with you. But that imagery he gives, right? And I would say it's, in my own opinion, it's more of an imagery that's relatable to the Jews in that time and culture than it would be to us. But basically the imagery of something overflowing onto your lap, right? So with all that being the case, I think that we need to meditate on how God operates, and we need to operate like God. That's a whole process of theosis. So I think that this is what we can take from this gospel here, right? Ultimately, the golden rule. do unto others as you would have them do unto you, not as they would to you, but as you would have them do unto you. So don't do to others what they do to you. Do to them what you would want done to yourself. May God bless you.